Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In the late 1970s, on a quiet farmstead south of Tyler, Texas, Dana Simmons experienced what would become one of the most frightening paranormal encounters of her life. Though she had experienced at least 5 paranormal incidents before, 3 she believed to be genuine apparitions, and 2 she considered suspect, none would compare to her encounter with what became known as the farmer's tractor. The property sat isolated a mile from the nearest neighbour, with all the hallmarks of a classic American farm. The scene was almost Norman Rockwell-esque. A weathered farmhouse, an old barn housing a dilapidated tractor, and acres of pasture stretching to the forest's edge. Dana, who described herself as naturally logical and cynical, hard to impress and even harder to scare, lived in the farmhouse with 2 roommates. The household also included 2 dogs, Dana's Doberman Pinscher named Molly, and Seamus, a German Shepherd, belonging to one of the roommates. It was the beginning of summer, and the party season was just getting underway. The day of the incident began ordinarily enough, with her roommates announcing their weekend beach plans that Friday morning, inviting Dana to join them to get away from it all. She declined, having already made evening plans to attend a party with her friend Marty and his new wife Debbie. That morning Dana had baked a cake for herself and her roommates, though they left without having any. She spent the day alone with the dogs, drinking coffee, enjoying a slice of cake, and reading the newspaper. Around 7 that evening, right on schedule, Marty and Debbie arrived to pick her up for the party. The gathering turned out to be disappointing. After Debbie had 2 or 3 bourbon and cokes, and Marty and Dana each had about 4 beers, they decided to leave. Dana, known among friends as the Black Hole of beer, wasn't particularly affected by the alcohol, nor were her companions. During the ride back to Dana's place, while discussing the lackluster party, she remembered the cake waiting at home. Rather than simply dropping her off, they decided to salvage their Friday night with coffee, cake and television. The moment they pulled into Dana's driveway, the evening's tone shifted dramatically. The driveway led straight to the farmhouse's back door, offering a clear view of the barn and his resident tractor through the car windows. Debbie, seated between Marty and Dana in the front, suddenly stiffened and let out a small gasp. When questioned, she insisted nothing was wrong, but immediately begged Marty to take her home, claiming she felt unwell. Marty, attributing her distress to hunger and the bourbon, encouraged her to come inside for cake. As they walked to the house, Debbie clung to Marty like a flotation device on the Titanic, while he practically dragged her along. Inside the lit kitchen, Debbie's face had gone ghostly pale. She rejected Dana's offers of cake or a sandwich to settle her supposed stomach issues, instead insisting on leaving immediately. Her explanations became increasingly flustered, alternating between claims of a headache and stomach pain. When Dana offered to pack out some cakes for them to take home, Debbie's agitation peaked. She practically shouted that Dana could bring them cake in the morning, but they needed to leave right now. Though puzzled by her behaviour, Dana agreed and the couple left after Marty and Dana exchanged bewildered glances. Left alone, Dana initially dismissed Debbie's strange behaviour as possible discomfort with her husband's platonic friendship with another woman, something she'd occasionally encountered with her male friends' new partners. She let the dogs out, made coffee, and watched the news before deciding to take a bath and read. Around 11 that night, she settled into bed with a true crime novel and coffee, the dogs lying contentedly beside her bed. Dana's bedroom was situated at the back of the house, sharing walls with both the kitchen and bathroom. From the far wall, one could see out of the back door of the house, and through the kitchen, the barn and his tractor were visible. She had left the bedroom door open for coffee runs and to give the dogs freedom to roam. Shortly after making a fresh coffee run and getting comfortable in bed, both dogs began to growl at something in the kitchen. Their fur stood on end as they slowly approached the doorway, then suddenly erupted into savage barking before turning back towards Dana on the bed. As she started to rise, concerned the dogs had gone nuts, Dana felt a large, man-sized presence sit on her lap. The dogs rushed the bed, barking and snapping furiously at something just inches above her lap. She struggled to move away as she felt two legs swing onto the bed and an immense pressure on her upper body, pushing her back until her head pressed against the headboard. Her legs painfully folded beneath her in a yoga-like position that threatened to break them. Molly jumped onto the bed, biting and foaming like a mad thing at something inches above Dana's face and stomach, whilst Seamus circled the bed, snapping at empty air where her legs would normally extend. Terror seized her, not of the dogs, but of the invisible entity pressing down on her. She clawed and shoved at it, screaming, fighting with all of her strength, while the dogs continued their frenzied defence. After what felt like hours, but was likely only a couple of minutes, the weight suddenly lifted. The dogs charged through the bedroom into the kitchen, crashing against the back door in pursuit. Dana stumbled to the door, fumbling with the lock while trying to control the frantic animals. Thinking to herself, the dogs can see it, let them get it, open the darn door and let the dogs have the foul thing. When she finally threw it open, they burst through the screen and raced towards the barn, foaming, growling and barking in full attack mode. As the dogs entered the barn, Dana glimpsed a greenish-blue light that vanished before her eyes. The dogs' barking and growling intensified to what she described as a killing frenzy, while she stood frozen in the kitchen staring through the door of the barn. The entire incident lasted about 20 minutes before suddenly ceasing. Dana watched as the dogs emerged from the barn, sniffing around as if they'd lost the scent. Molly approached the door whining, with Seamus following behind, still investigating the area. Quickly letting the dogs back inside without taking her eyes off the barn, Dana locked the door and clapped into a kitchen chair. She sat there shaking and crying, while Molly placed her head on her lap, as if to reassure her. As her terror slowly subsided, she contemplated calling the sheriff's deputies, but struggled to imagine how she would explain the incident. Then she remembered Debbie's earlier behaviour. Despite the late hour, Dana immediately called Marty and Debbie's home, the dogs staying right at her heels. When Marty answered, she learned that Debbie had refused to explain her behaviour at the farmhouse, maintaining her illness excuse despite quickly recovering once they were home and locked in for the night. Only after Marty conveyed Dana's distressed state did Debbie agree to speak with her. When Dana shared her frightening experience, Debbie finally revealed what she'd seen earlier that evening. As they pulled into the driveway, Debbie had noticed what appeared to be a light in the barn. There she saw a figure, a man in old farm clothes with the same greenish-blue glow about him, standing beside the old tractor. The apparition had fixed her with such a hateful glare that she felt it wanted to kill her. Recognising it as a ghost by its hazy appearance and otherworldly glow, she had panicked but kept quiet, fearing ridicule if she shared her experience. Her fear for her own safety had been so overwhelming that she hadn't even considered Dana might be in danger. Upon hearing both women's accounts, Marty insisted on coming over immediately, but Dana, now somewhat calmed by understanding the nature of her monster, asked him to wait until morning. She spent the remainder of the night awake, wondering why the ghost had attacked her and why no previous incidents had been reported. When her roommates returned from their beach trip, Dana shared her experience. Though they had lived in the farmhouse for almost a year before she moved in, they had never encountered anything unusual. Curious about the property's history, one of Dana's roommates suggested visiting the nearest neighbour to inquire about any local ghost stories. The elderly farming couple who lived nearby welcomed them with glasses of cold tea and were unsurprised by Dana's tale. They explained that the farm's original owner had been a mean-spirited, greedy and possessive man who became increasingly antisocial after his wife's passing. He was known for his poor treatment of neighbours, particularly regarding his tractor, his pride and joy. He would charge excessive rental fees to use it on neighbouring farms, taking pleasure in flaunting his superior financial status. In his final years, the farmer's possessiveness intensified to the point where he refused to leave the property, fearing theft. Though he could no longer operate the tractor, he maintained a daily ritual of caring for it, washing, oiling and starting it regularly to ensure its condition, even though it never left the barn. He passed away in his sleep in the very bedroom where Dana had a terrifying encounter, approximately 5 years before she and her roommates began renting the property. The farmer's inheritors, having no use for the rural property or its antiquated tractor in the modern era, immediately began renting out the farm after his passing. Remarkably, Dana's encounter appeared to be an isolated incident. Her roommates continued living there for several years after she moved out, never experiencing any paranormal activity. Even Dana's remaining time at the property continued without further incident. The experience left a powerful mark on both women. Dana never fully understood why the haunting occurred that single time, speculating that perhaps the alignment of the stars or the presence of two women with slight psychic tendencies had somehow triggered the farmer's angry manifestation. Debbie's reaction was more definitive. She never experienced another ghostly encounter, but she also never set foot on the farm again, requiring Dana to visit her at home or meet with Marty alone.